The mysterious disappearance. The village of Nyandoro lay nestled between rolling green hills and the great river Tandotsi, which had nourished its people for generations. The river was sacred, a gift from the gods, and no one in the village took its presence for granted. Among the villagers, Kwame was one of the most respected men. A skilled fisherman with a strong, lean frame and calloused hands, he provided food for his family and the village with unmatched precision. His wife, Zubaida, was known for her beauty. Her dark, glowing skin and deep, knowing eyes held an air of mystery that made her unforgettable. But beyond her beauty, it was her devotion to Kwame and their son, Django, that made their home warm and full of love. Every morning, before Kwame left to fish, he would sit Zubaida down on a stool outside their hut. He would dip his fingers into a bowl of sacred white clay, tracing intricate designs across her forehead. It was a tradition passed down from his ancestors, a mark of protection, love, and loyalty. This way, I know you are mine, and you will always return to me, Kwame would say, smiling as he admired his work. Zubaida would giggle softly, tilting her face to the sunlight. And this way, I know you will always return home, safe and sound, my love. With that, Kwame would kiss her gently, gather his fishing net, and head to the river while Zubaida remained home, tending to the chores and caring for little Django. But lately, something troubled Kwame. Every evening when he returned, the sacred clay had vanished from Zubaida's forehead. Not a single trace of the white markings remained, as though it had been wiped away by unseen hands. At first, Kwame thought nothing of it. The village was hot, and the work of a housewife was not easy, surely sweat or water had washed the clay away. But when he asked Zubaida about it, her answer always remained the same. The river washes it away when I fetch water, she said, her tone gentle but unwavering. Kwame wanted to believe her, but something about her response felt incomplete, as if there was more she wasn't saying. One evening, after 3 moons of watching the clay disappear without explanation, Kwame's suspicion grew too heavy to ignore. As Zubaida lay beside him in their small hut, her breathing deep and steady, Kwame lay awake, staring at the thatched roof. The seed of doubt had taken root. The river had always been sacred, but there were whispers among the elders, stories of those who had disrespected the spirits of the water and suffered the consequences. Tales of men and women who had been claimed by the river, their lives forever changed. Was Zubaida hiding something? That night, as the village slept, Kwame made a decision. He would find out the truth himself. At the first sign of dawn, before Zubaida could wake, Kwame painted the sacred clay on her forehead with extra care, making sure the designs were bold and thick. Then, as he kissed her goodbye and slung his fishing net over his shoulder, he did not go to the river. Instead, he hid among the tall baobab trees, waiting and watching. His heart pounded in his chest. The truth was about to reveal itself. The serpent's embrace. The early morning air was thick with mist as Kwame crouched behind the dense undergrowth, his breath shallow, his pulse racing. His muscles tensed as he watched Zubaida walk towards the river Tandotsi, the pot balanced effortlessly on her head. The golden morning light glowed against her dark skin, but something about her movements felt different today, almost cautious. She moved with a grace that made Kwame's unease grow deeper. Instead of heading directly to the river's edge to fetch water as she always did, she paused, looking around as if ensuring no one was watching. Kwame pressed his back against the thick trunk of a baobab tree, heart hammering in his chest. Then, he saw her do something that sent a chill through his bones. Zubaida removed her headscarf and ran her fingers through her long, flowing hair. Then, in a voice he had never heard before, low, melodic, and laced with an eerie familiarity, she spoke. Mosi. My love, I am here. The words sent shivers down Kwame's spine. For a moment, there was only silence. The river remained still, its surface smooth as polished stone. But then, a ripple disturbed the calm waters, spreading outward in slow, deliberate circles. A soft hum filled the air. It was not a sound made by man or beast, it was something else entirely. The river began to glow with an otherworldly shimmer, its light reflecting in Zubaydah's expectant eyes. Then, the water parted. A massive form emerged, breaking through the surface like a spirit rising from the depths. Kwame's hands trembled as he beheld the impossible. Before him stood a monstrous serpent, its body sleek and powerful, covered in scales that gleamed like polished emeralds. A thick golden mane framed its regal head, flowing like molten fire under the morning sun. Its eyes, piercing, intelligent, and ancient, burned with a light that felt both wise and dangerous. Then, the serpent changed. Before Kwame's disbelieving eyes, the creature began to shift. Its massive body coiled and morphed, shrinking and reshaping until it stood on two legs. Where the serpent had been, there now stood a striking man-like figure, tall, with a powerful build, golden hair flowing like a river, and emerald-green eyes that held the weight of centuries. His bare chest glowed like the water itself, and his lower body remained coiled in serpent form, shifting and pulsing like a living shadow. Kwame gasped silently, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. This was no ordinary being. This was Mosi, the river guardian. And then, before Kwame could blink, Zubaydah ran into his arms. With a smile of deep longing, she wrapped her arms around the half-man, half-serpent, pressing her face into his chest. Mosi's arms curled protectively around her, his long fingers tracing the outline of her back. The intimacy of their embrace made Kwame's stomach churn. His wife, his Zubaydah, was not just meeting this creature. She was embracing him as a lover. Kwame's nails dug into his palms. His blood burned with fury and confusion. He wanted to rush forward, to tear Zubaydah away from the serpent's grasp. To fight. To kill. But something held him back. He had come here seeking the truth. And now, standing amidst the whispers of the wind and the glow of the river, he realized the truth was more than he had imagined. Who, or what, was Zubaydah? And why was the river guardian holding her as if she belonged to him? Kwame gritted his teeth, his heart heavy with betrayal. But he would not strike yet. He needed to know more. So he remained hidden, watching, listening, waiting. Betrayal and the wrath of the river gods. Kwame could barely contain his rage as he followed Zubaydah back to their home, his fist clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. His mind raced with images of her in the arms of the serpent, Mosi, whispering words of love he was never meant to hear. By the time she stepped through the doorway, the weight of his anger had become unbearable. What did I see today, Zubaydah? His voice was low but sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. Zubaydah froze, her back to him. For a moment, she said nothing. Her shoulders trembled. Turn around. Kwame roared, his voice shaking the very walls of their hut. Slowly, she turned to face him. Her dark eyes glistened, filled with sorrow, but not fear. There was something else in them. A quiet resignation. A truth that could no longer remain hidden. Tell me it was a dream, a trick of the river. Tell me you have not betrayed me. Kwame's chest heaved. Tell me you have not given yourself to that thing. Zubaydah inhaled deeply, closing her eyes for a moment before speaking. It is not what you think, Kwame. I have not betrayed you, but I have not been truthful either. Kwame scoffed. Not truthful. Not truthful. I saw you, Zubaydah. In his arms. You, my wife, clutching that creature like a lover. How can you say you have not betrayed me? She flinched at his words, but when she lifted her gaze, it was filled with something deeper than shame. It was filled with ancient sorrow. Because, Kwame, I was never truly yours to begin with. The words struck him like a spear to the chest. Before he could demand an explanation, Zubaydah stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. I was not born in this village, nor was I ever meant to live among humans. I was once a guardian of the river Tandotsi. A being of water and spirit, bound to protect its sacred depths. Kwami's body stiffened. A river guardian. Zubaida continued, her voice now thick with emotion. But I was foolish. I fell in love with a human, a man much like you. I wanted to be with him, to walk on land and bear his children. But the river gods do not forgive so easily. She took a shaky breath. As punishment, they stripped me of my power and made me mortal, tying my fate to the very river I once protected. But they did not let me go completely. They assigned Mosi to watch over me. Kwami's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. Mosi. Your lover. Zubaida shook her head. No. My guardian. He is bound to me as I am bound to the river. If I were to reject him completely, if I were to sever our bond, the gods would not punish me alone. She swallowed, her next words carrying the weight of 1,000 storms. They would punish the land. The river would dry. The crops would wither. The people would suffer. Kwame stared at her, his heart pounding like a war drum. His wife was never human. Everything he thought he knew, everything he had built his life upon, felt like a cruel illusion. His home. His marriage. His love. He took a step back, his words spinning. Zubaida's eyes pleaded with him. I did not choose this, Kwame. I chose you. I chose our life. But I cannot escape my past. But Kwame's vision had turned red. He did not see a woman burdened by fate. He saw a liar. A woman who had deceived him. A creature who belonged to the river, not to him. His mind screamed for justice. For vengeance. For freedom. And in that moment, he made his choice. The serpent had to die. If the river gods had bound his wife to Mosi, then surely, by killing the serpent, the bond would be broken. She would be his and his alone. With that dark thought, Kwame turned away from Zubaida, his mind already forming a plan. His heart had turned to stone. The man who had once loved her more than life itself was gone. Only a hunter remained. And the hunt was about to begin, the hunter's rage. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in deep shades of crimson and gold. A warm wind swept through the village, carrying the distant murmur of the river. But Kwame did not hear the whispers of nature. His mind was consumed by only one thought, revenge. The sacred iron spear lay heavy in his grip, its tip sharpened to pierce the flesh of the serpent who had stolen his wife. The blacksmith had spoken of its power, I am blessed by the village elders, dipped in the sacred oils of the ancestors. No spirit, no beast, no demon could escape its wrath. He would end this curse. He would reclaim what was his. As night fell, Kwame moved like a shadow through the trees, his breath controlled, his muscles tensed like a hunter stalking his prey. The river glowed softly under the moon's pale light, and soon, Zubaida appeared, her silhouette outlined against the water. Kwame remained hidden, his fingers tightening around the spear. She stood at the river's edge, her body still as stone, then whispered, Mosi. My love, I am here. The words were like venom in Kwame's ears. A deep ripple disturbed the calm waters. Slowly, the river churned and parted as Mosi emerged, his golden mane gleaming, his emerald eyes reflecting the moon's light. His presence was both beautiful and terrible. Half man. Half serpent. A creature of legend. A thief of love. Zubaida stepped into his embrace, resting her head against his chest. Mosi wrapped his long, powerful arms around her, his serpent's tail curling gently at her feet. Kwame's rage boiled over. With a roar, he lunged from the shadows, his spear aimed straight for Mosi's heart. The world slowed as the sacred iron sliced through the air, gleaming with deadly intent. For a moment, Kwame thought he had won. The spear pierced Mosi's side, sinking deep into his flesh. Then, the serpent let out a cry so powerful it shattered the night. It was not a scream of pain, it was a sound of the earth itself splitting apart. The trees trembled. The ground quaked beneath Kwame's feet. The river, once peaceful, began to rise, churning like an angry beast, its waters turning dark as storm clouds gathered above. Lightning flashed. Zubaida let out a blood-curdling scream, clutching her head as her body began to tremble violently. "No! No! What have you done?" she shrieked, her voice filled with pure terror. Before Kwame's eyes, her skin began to shimmer, as though something beneath it was struggling to emerge. Her nails lengthened into curved black claws. Her pupils turned to slits. Her legs melted into a long, coiling serpent's tail. She collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, her body no longer fully human. Kwame stumbled backward, his spear slipping from his hands. The curse, it had been awakened. Zubaida turned her glowing, inhuman eyes toward him, her voice now layered with something ancient. "You have doomed us all, Kwame." The river roared, and the storm above grew darker, angrier, hungrier. Mosi, still impaled, raised his head, and though his face was twisted in pain, his eyes were filled with something else, sorrow. The wind howled, the trees bent, and the fate of the land trembled on the edge of ruin. Kwame had thought he was saving his wife. Instead, he had unleashed a nightmare. The transformation. The storm raged, the winds howling like a chorus of mourning spirits. The river, once the giver of life, had turned against the land. The waves surged violently, frothing with a strange luminescence as if the gods themselves had awakened in fury. And at the heart of it all, Zubaida screamed. Her body twisted in pain, her fingers clawing at the earth as the transformation overtook her. The shimmer on her skin grew brighter, shifting and rippling like liquid gold. Her legs melted into a long, coiling serpent's tail, glistening with deep green and silver scales. "No! No!" Kwame stumbled back, his breath ragged as he watched in horror. Zubaida's screams turned into desperate gasps, her human voice fading, replaced by a deep, echoing hiss. Her face remained half human, half serpent, her eyes glowing like two burning emeralds. From where he lay, Mosi groaned, the sacred iron spear still lodged in his side. Blood, thick, black, and shimmering like ink, spilled from his wound, staining the river's surface. His breathing was shallow, but his gaze was steady. Through labored breaths, he whispered, "You were never meant to be human. The river calls you back." Zubaida's eyes widened in realization. For the first time, she understood. Her entire life, her love, her son, her home had been borrowed. She had tried to live as a woman of the land, but she was never meant to belong here. The gods had only been patient. Now, they were reclaiming her. With a final, shuddering breath, Zubaida's human form disappeared beneath the waves. Kwame lunged forward. "Zubaida." He reached for her, but the river pulled her deeper, swallowing her whole. The glow in the water faded, leaving nothing but the ripples of her passing. Then, as if the world itself held its breath, the river fell silent. Kwame collapsed to his knees. She was gone. The silence did not last. A deep, unnatural cracking sound filled the air, like the splitting of dry earth. The river began to recede. Kwame watched in horror as the once mighty river Tandotsi shrunk before his eyes. The water pulled back as if fleeing the land, its vibrant blue turning dull and lifeless. The air, once thick with moisture, became dry and brittle. The storm dissipated, the sky turning into a cold, grey void. But the damage had been done. Within days, the crops withered under the sun's relentless gaze. The fish, once plentiful in the river, vanished, leaving the villagers with empty nets and growling stomachs. Children wept from thirst, elders prayed to the gods, and the once prosperous village of Nyandoro fell into despair. The people whispered of Kwame's sin. He angered the river gods. He struck down a guardian. He has doomed us all. The village elders gathered under the great baobab of ancestors, their faces grim, their voices solemn. Only a sacred offering will restore the river, said the eldest of them, his voice weighed down by wisdom and sorrow. The gods must be appeased, or we will all perish. A murmur rippled through the crowd. What offering would satisfy the gods? Who or what would be enough to bring Zubaida back? And most of all, who would pay the price for Kwame's mistake? The children's dilemma. The days after Zubaida's disappearance were heavy with sorrow. The once thriving village of Nyandoro had become a land of cracked earth and dry throats. The river had abandoned them. The gods had turned away. And in the midst of it all, Django dreamed. Each night, the boy tossed and turned in his sleep, his small body drenched in sweat. In his dreams, the river called to him. The water, dark and endless, stretched before him, and from its depths, a voice whispered his name. Django, my son. It was his mother's voice, soft, filled with longing, but burdened with sadness. He saw flashes of her serpent form, her emerald eyes glowing with sorrow. The water shimmered around her as she reached for him, but before he could touch her, he would always wake up, gasping, heart pounding, throat dry as dust. Night after night, the dream came. Until one evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, Django could not bear it any longer. While his father lay restless in their hut, lost in grief, Django slipped into the night, his bare feet silent against the earth. The path to the river was different now, emptier, colder. The once lush trees stood still as if holding their breath. When he reached the riverbank, he hesitated. The water was not as it used to be. The current was slow and tired, barely moving under the weight of its own sorrow. Then, from beneath the surface, a shadow shifted. The water rippled outward, and she rose. Django's breath caught in his throat. His mother, but no longer the woman he once knew. Her upper body was still the mother he remembered, soft, familiar, beautiful, but her lower half was now a long, coiling serpent's tail, shimmering with green and silver scales. The glow of the river reflected in her sorrowful emerald eyes. Django, my son. Tears burned in his eyes. Mama. She reached out, but he took a step back. Zubaida's face fell, pain flickering in her gaze. You are afraid of me. Django swallowed. He was afraid, but not of her. He was afraid of what this all meant. His mother, his kind, gentle mother, was now a creature of the river. Why did you leave me? Why did the river take you? His voice cracked. Zubaida sighed, her serpent tail shifting beneath the water. Because I was never meant to stay. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, full of love but burdened with a heavy truth. You are not only your father's son, Django. She placed a hand over her heart. You are mine too. And I was never meant to walk among men. The words twisted in his chest. What do you mean? Zubaida's voice softened. You carry the blood of both worlds, the land and the water, the human and the serpent. You were born with a choice, my son. Django's stomach twisted. A choice. His mother nodded, sadness lining her face. You can live as a man, or you can return to the river with me. But if you refuse the river's call, I will be trapped in this form forever. The boy's hands trembled. But I belong here. And you will, if you choose to stay. But I will never walk the land again. I will remain beneath the water, never to hold you, never to guide you. Django's heart pounded in his chest. How could he choose? If he stayed, his mother would be lost to the river forever. If he went, he would leave his father, his home, his people. His father. Tears welled in Django's eyes. What about Baba? Zubaida's expression darkened with pain. He is broken by his anger. But he must find his own path, as you must find yours. Django clenched his fist. He needed help. He thought of the wisest woman in Nyandoro, Bibi Kanza, the village seer. I need time. I need to understand. Django said. Zubaida's gaze softened. Then seek the wisdom you need. But remember, my son, time is fleeting. And the river does not wait. With that, she slipped beneath the water, her form vanishing into the depths, leaving only repose where she had been. Django stood frozen for a long moment. Then, with a heavy heart, he turned away from the river and ran back into the night. He needed answers. He needed to find Bibi Kanza. The final choice. The sun dipped low over Nyandoro, casting long golden shadows across the parched earth. The river remained weak, struggling against the curse that had drained its life. The village whispered in fear, waiting for salvation or doom. But Django had made his choice. After seeking the wisdom of Bibi Kanza, the village seer, he had come to understand the truth. He was not only his father's son. He was not only a child of the land. He was something more. Something between. And so, as dusk settled over the land, Django returned to the river for the final time. His father followed. A father's plea. Kwame's voice cracked with desperation. Django. Don't do this. The boy hesitated at the river's edge, his heart heavy with the weight of his father's sorrow. Kwame had lost Bida. Now, he feared he would lose his son too. My son. I have made terrible mistakes. I let my anger blind me. I lost your mother because I could not understand what she truly was. Kwame stepped forward, his hands trembling. Please, do not leave me too. Django turned, his small face filled with a wisdom far beyond his years. Baba. I love you. And I will always love you. But this is who I am. Kwame's chest heaved. No. You belong here. With your people, with me. Tears burned Django's eyes, but he knew the truth now. I belong to both. The river shimmered, and from its depths, Zubaida rose once more. Her emerald eyes glowed with quiet sadness, but also with pride. Her serpent's tail curled beneath her, gleaming in the moonlight. She reached out to her son, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. It is time, my love. The river calls you home. The serpent's gift. Django took a deep breath and stepped forward. Zubaida extended her hand, revealing a small object resting in her palm, a serpent ring, crafted from shimmering silver and jade, its eyes glinting like 2 drops of the river itself. She gently placed it in his hand. This is your bond to both worlds. Should you ever wish to return to the land, it will guide you back. But if you choose the river, it will remind you of where you came from. Django closed his fingers around the ring, his heart pounding. The weight of his choice settled upon him, but he did not waver. With one final look at his father, at the man who had raised him, loved him, but also feared what he did not understand, Django gave a sad, small smile. I will see you again, Baba. I promise. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped into the water. Destiny fulfilled. The river embraced him like a long-lost child. The moment his body touched the water, a brilliant glow erupted from beneath the surface, spiraling upward in ribbons of blue and silver light. The wind shifted, carrying a sweet, cool breeze across the land. The villagers, gathered in silent prayer, gasped as the impossible happened before their eyes. The river began to flow once more. The dry, cracked earth quivered, then drank deeply as the water surged forward, bringing life back to the dying land. The crops straightened, their leaves glistening with fresh dew. The fish returned, leaping joyfully in the rushing currents. Nyandoro had been saved. But Kwame had lost his son. He collapsed to his knees at the riverbank, his chest rising and falling with silent sobs. The water swirled around his feet, whispering secrets he could not understand. Then, as the last traces of glowing light faded beneath the waves, he heard his son's voice, soft, distant, but full of warmth. "I will always be with you, Baba. Always." Kwame clenched the serpent ring in his hand, his tears falling into the flowing river. And for the first time, he truly understood. This was never a curse. It was destiny. His wife had returned to the river. His son had embraced his true self. And he would carry their memory in his heart, forever. The end.